it won't take you too long to finish these walkthrough. Like for example, let's say here, you need to complete the virtual machine. So virtual machine, yeah, approximately took about 5 to 10 minutes. And then you have another one, containers, and probably this is also like about 5 minutes to complete. It's very straightforward steps to do that. Create virtual network, blob storage, SQL database. So yeah, approximately, because I've done all of these before. So I think all of these walkthrough, it won't take more than like an hour or so. Let's give it like maximum of 2 hours if you want to read and document and all this stuff. So yeah, you have, I think, till Wednesday. Well, to be honest, the assignment is not for me. It's for you to, for you to keep and track with all the information that you're getting from here, and also to develop your skills using more practical parts instead of just theory stuff.
Okay, thank you. Did you say till Wednesday? Yeah.
Yeah, Wednesday.
All
So
right.
basically, it's till next session. So every session is till whatever we get is till session after that.
All right. Thanks.
No worries. So in this session, we are going to talk about the security, privacy, compliance, and trust with Microsoft Azure. Okay, so to start off with, the learning objectives is to understand, describe how the secure network connectivity in Microsoft Azure, core Azure Identity Services, security tools and features, Azure governance methodologies, monitoring and reporting in Azure, privacy, compliance, and data protection standard in Azure. We are starting to basically to touch more of the cyber aspects here that would typically be for a physical compute system, that even if you are a cloud or as a a server engineer, you wouldn't be responsible necessarily for all the servers and compliance and the security aspects there. So we are slightly outside of what the job might be with some of these things, but you do need to know them because if you are working in a small organization, you will need to be able to do some of them naturally, but also if you are a large organization, you may interface with some of these departments, so it's quite important to know the terminology of and the features, and it can at least find out what the problem might be if one's occurring. So security, network connectivity. So defense can be through of the hierarchical system, generally in terms of computing. So you've got a layered approach to secure computing system. So we want to have multiple levels of protection wherever possible, and we need to be able to isolate attacks against one layer and from subsequent layers. So if we start to talk with the physical security, door locks and things, identity and access. So making sure that someone can get in unless they meet the specific requirements. Parameter access, it's making sure, it is about making sure that someone cannot access the physical or the online area from up to a certain parameters. Obviously, there will be someone interaction with the cloud systems, but um, you want to give them access to certain parts and no access to secure parts. Then we have the network. So you need to make sure that if they if they are onto network, that they only access the certain parts of the network that they are allowed to access or have permissions, not to try to access things that they shouldn't be, but just because someone met the identity requirement doesn't mean that they are always going to access the part of the network that they should be. So you can have people mimicking the identity access, or just people maliciously using their credentials to try and access other parts of a network that they shouldn't be. The physical compute, basically, and practical side of, so if there is malicious code or applications going on there on in there, and doing things nefariously that they shouldn't uh, they shouldn't be. So ideally, you need to have everything verified before installing or setting up on the cloud. Unfortunately, we are going to be sticking with just mostly Azure specific services that then have been verified by Microsoft as being secured and safe to run. And then we've got the data at the bottom, and this is often where where your value where you value basically your privacy and security or business reputation sites. So this is really important to make sure that the data at the bottom side is as secured and defended as possible. Okay, and then we have the shared security. If you remember, last session we talked about some stuff that the cloud manage, and some other stuff that the user, you as a user, you manage on the cloud. uh, Depends on what you'll be working on, like the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. So in a shared security system, there is sort of a migration from customer control to cloud-based data centers, and that shifts the responsibility of security. So if you got on premises, so a server farm that you are maintaining, uh, you are going to be running here, and that's all down to you in terms of customers or the user being responsible for all these different things. But as you move up through, there's stratified levels of cloud provisions to infrastructure as a service. You got Microsoft being responsible for certain parts of security, and this is where we're sharing of uh, concerns of security matches between Microsoft and consumers for of Azure. When you go to a platform as a service, you've got Microsoft as the customer being responsible for certain parts, but Microsoft being responsible of the for the operating system in particular, as a platform as a service. And then when you move to software as a service, Microsoft takes more of that responsibility. So, and still, basically, Uh, this is still the consumer element in terms of account management, client endpoint, data governance, and the identity and directory infrastructure. So even if Microsoft is hosting your software, you still need to make sure that you are securing the identity and the directory structure of the users that you are going to be actually interacting with that software. So the Azure firewall is usefully is a stateful managed firewall as a service, which they use the terms or the shortcut FAAS, firewall as a service, and this is a grants ordinance service access based on originating IP addresses. So the address is linked to your computer, specifically those that machines, and this is to protect network resources. This is applies inbound and outbound traffic and light filtering rules. So it comes here. So it comes here, and it's either hits the green or amber or red traffic lights, and we are being to understand to under investigate red being banned. So it's built in high availability, unrestricted cloud scalability, which is really valuable here, especially if you are getting attacked by denial of service attacks, and then uses Azure Monitor login. Now, despite being massively Windows-oriented organization, Microsoft Azure is apparently protected by a wall of Linux computers, which was always the standard and often looked down on the way of doing computing by Microsoft, but it is the only thing that reliably works 100% of the time. We also have Azure Application Gateway, which provides a firewall, which is a web application firewall, or we called WAF. It's provides centralized inbound protection. For your web application. And if you are interested, you can find out more about Azure Firewall in the document I shared in the Teams file. In these documents, basically. So if you go to your resources, nothing in here. So in here you can find some of these stuff. There is another list I need to upload as well. Okay, have you heard about the term, or like, have you heard about denied services attack or DOS attack before?
Yeah, it is the basically overwhelming of the system, isn't it?
Pardon? I didn't hear you.
The distributed denial of service, that's basically when you get too many traffic on a particular website to bring it down. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. So basically, you've got a website with a secure login area, right? Which is like pretty much all of them have now, and an area you log into to get your account or to your access or whatever. So what if you type the password wrong, and so you get denied access? It get denied access. So what happened if you did it 10 times or 100 times? So you are getting denied access 10 times or 100 times, yeah? And each time the server every time go and try to log into the to log in the server the server basically takes the input, and whether it is your email address in the or username or in the login box, and the password as well gets to its database security, goes right, goes like, is it the right email and password? So if it is not, okay, never mind. You know, you can just log in. You can't log in. So it's doing an SQL or a server database check each time, which takes amount of computing power. It takes a small amount of compute power to each check for one person, and let them log in basically. So the thing is, if you are doing this million times, so that start to take longer and longer, and to back up the amount of requests that the server is doing. So the way that a denial of service attack works, and this is was historic, that it would works this way, but the denial service is where someone's written a computer program so that the that say my laptop is going to try to log into my Amazon account with the wrong password, and it's just going and keep doing it and doing it again and again and again. So it's going to do a million times, and you know, like comes to a trillion times. And even if it's only taking 0.1 second for each of those attempts, all of the sudden backing up these servers, and that's having to focus on my computer, uh, telling me. So all the servers will be focused, like the whole server will be focusing on my computer and telling me, no, you're not logging in. You have wrong details. So just doing this over and over and denying my laptop service. That the thing is, I've designed that program to makes my laptop get denied backup. So the server then, with everyone else is trying to log in, so everyone else trying to shop or like, so the server is then very busy trying to deal with me. I can't basically host the website, can't do database check for everyone else, and therefore that's a problem that falls over. So eventually it says, it just trying to do too many database check in a short time, and it crashes. So that's denial of service attack. 30 years ago, that denial of service attack was uh, of itself a bad thing. Folded over credit cards companies sometimes, well, rarely, but there were a couple of times that there were a big denial of service attack where criminal gangs or hackers had generally got a powerful enough computers and stable enough internet connection to get computers or supercomputers constantly uh, request access. So the thing is that it's quite easy with the cloud system to avoid. Uh, so you just have two computers that are hosting the website at the same time, and are doing the database check, so that even if someone getting bogged down with lots of service or denial service requests, the other one is doing fine hosting the website still. So the way that they got around that, as criminal gangs hackers or as hackers, was using distributed denial of service attack. So instead of just getting one computer and constantly request access, so you use cloud computers or networks of computers that hundred or thousands, millions different computers are constantly asking for access, instead of being a million, instead of it being a million requests in a minute, it ends up being like a trillion requests in a minute. So even in a very well secured, and powerful cloud website system, strong database set, in the background. That's really fast access, and even that will get bogged down with the distributed denial services attacks, because it is done from multiple different computers in distributed way. You can't just say you are constantly asking for access. I'm going to deny your IP. I'm going to block your IP address from coming to my website. I'm going to block your yours, because they just keep springing up new and more cloud instance, or more and more computers with different IP addresses. So it's not simple. It's just as just going. I'll just block the IP address. I'll just block you from asking to access, or I'll just block you basically. So that's when it becomes difficult. Unfortunately, fortunately, cloud providers have put a lot of work into getting distributed denial services protection, or DDoS protection. So, what DDoS protections, DDoS, and the way that they've worked is they worked it. It's there no perfect way of preventing this. There is always going to be a way that hackers and criminals gangs find ways into system, or can um, uh, actively, like, find a way basically to actively, as we call it. So the DDoS attacks that overwhelm and exhaust network resources. Uh, the protection sanitize unwanted network traffic before impact service availability. So you've got basic service the tier as automatically enabled in Azure, and then you've got standard services that adds migration capabilities to protect Azure virtual network resources. Now, outside of the cloud providers, uh, you get some there is some very advanced security and cybersecurity companies, and one of the cool tools that they often um, uh, seems to work very well, called Tote, I guess. If you are very careful, I think no, it's called Honeypot, basically, but it's very well, if it's very well and effective if you are very careful with it. So the idea of the honeypot that um, is that you have a separate system that's outside of the cloud, or outside the main website and database for that company, that looks like exactly like that company, but they call it a honeypot because it's very attractive to bees, and takes that analogy over that. If you think the bees as a DOS attack, so swarm of bees is coming to try and attack the website, and if and you take the honeypot that looks like a website, so that acts like a website first, but actually every pea is down to that honeypot. It keeps the actual website working, and all those have gone that way, are attacking the honeypot and busy trying to make that fall over. So the idea is that whilst the bees are attacking the honeypot, the cybersecurity company can see where all of those bees basically or attacks are coming from, then hack them back, crush them, try rather than the other way around. So you end up with this cyber warfare situation going on, and with that, or they have other measures they can play or can put in place with the honeypot, but is it just is an added layer of protection. So Microsoft will have other cybersecurity companies or cybersecurity divisions of the companies on standby, ready to do things like that. If they are like if Azure under attack, basically under big attack, basically. So network security group or NSGs. So the network security group, these are filters systems that filter the network traffic to and from Azure resources on Azure Virtual Network. You can do a whole degrees of and masters, and additionally, beyond qualifications in network security and things. So we are not going to go much in details. They are mostly because it's well outside of my own competition expertise. So I don't want to give any false information or things about that, but you can set inbound and outbound rules to filter secure and by destination IP addresses. Remember, IP address being the address or the name of the computer. In essence, you can add multiple rules as needed within your subscription limits. And then you can apply default baseline security rules or override those default rules with high priority rules as well. So if you need to make sure that certain people have a higher priority access to the system than others, then you can do that. Application security group. So then there are security gateway groups too. So individual groups or of service or part filtering requirements or services similar functions like web services, and you can have same security rules and things operating for those just make management so much easier. Uh, you don't want to have to come up with thousands different network and cybersecurity rules for each server. So that's running when you got 100 servers running, let's say the same system in parallel. So this allows you to reuse your security policy, and it handles complexity of explicit IP addresses and multiple rules sets, allowing you to focus on your business logics. Just give me a second. Let me just get some water. So choosing Azure supports combined network security solution. So you can look at the network security group with Azure Firewall. So OAuth and the web applications firewall Azure without Azure Firewall. There are some walkthrough examples as well that you will go through Azure that I will go through as well through the Azure learning portal. I'll leave that to you to do it in your own time. So the core identity services, we are going to talk about some of the core identity services as well. There's going to be some stuff in there that you are going like I don't have a clue what that word means or what this thing means, or if you are still not sure what the IP addresses is, don't worry. Uh, keep the note of all these terms or stuff, and I will get to that point and try to add some more details to these things. Okay. So authentication and authorization. So there are two concepts, fundamentals to understand identity and access. Um, so we've got authentication on the left. This would be identifying the person who or service seeking access to a resource to resource. It requires a legitimate legit access credentials, and there's basis for creating secure identity and access control pipelines. So for example, so for BCU now, we have authentication. For authentication part, we have what we call it multi-factor authentication. So every time I want to log in into my computer, I can open it fine, but I want to log in into my emails or Teams. I need to use I need to use them. Basically, what we call multi-factor authentication, where it text my phone or call my phones and gives me 6-digit code every time. I want to log into my a fresh or if it is time to log in, which is good for security point of view. But if you are somewhere where you have Wi-Fi, but you don't have a phone network, you are stuck. So you're stuck out. So it can be restricted. Then we have authorization. So this is determines the an authorized authenticated persons or services level of access, where um, where are you going to let them get to? They have access to this bit of information, to that part of the database, to do these queries, and they are restricted from doing X, Y, and Z. So defines which data you can access and what you can do with it. So much of Azure cloud-based identity and access management services is called the Active Directory, or AD. So you've got authentication where employees sign in to access resources. Um, sign on where you just sign once, and then you've got access to that forever. You can manage that in terms of the applications management, give them access for certain period to do certain things, and then remove them. So business to business, or what you call it B2B, you may have heard of that term, where if you are business giving entire other organization um, uh, certain privilege and things, or when you have a business to consumer, or B2C, where you are giving that to a specific person, a specific email address, or all users, and then you got an individual device management too. So Azure multi-factor authentication. Okay, so I was just saying about the Azure multi-factor authentication. This provides additional security for your identities by requiring two or more elements for full authentication. So you need to give us to give as well as your username and password, something like something, you know, possess something. You are as well just an additional layer or level of proof the some system requires. Some system basically requires face identification or fingerprint recognition system uh, um, at the moment. So you can find these kind of systems now. So security tools and features is the next section. So you've got this whole Azure Security Center to look, and it's the monitoring service that gives you uh, threat protection across all of Azure and non-promise services. So you've got your security recommendation based on your configuration, your resources, and your network. And this is actually, you know, it's like 10, 15 years ago, you might have thought that this is so important to be able to monitor threats and services. Either you are going to get hacked or not. Um, as you know, small, medium enterprises, enterprise, but now it's really important based upon data protection, GDPR, if we call it, and reputational impacts of having to go out to say to all your customers, sorry, we've been hacked, and can happen. So on large scale, on even small scale. So automatically, this is automatically applies the security policies to any new service in your provision as well. So it templates them for you basically. Uh, so there are multiple different scenarios that you might be working in here, but with the security center where you can detect access, diagnose, stabilize, and close basically. In general, if you got an online system that's got secure information on that someone is attacking, you need to close that down quickly. So, and then see what could be solved. Okay. So if you got a ransomware attack, which is happening more and more internationally, have you heard by any chance about ransomware attack? Anyone heard of it before?
Say again?
The WannaCry. Remember the NHS a couple of years ago? WannaCry, like
exactly, exactly. And this is one of the examples I was going to give actually. So, so this is something that hitting the news here and there, but not as big as it should be. There are massive issues at the moment. So you got, if someone is hacked onto your computer, says that your system or your servers or your online platform, and then change all the password. If it is done to your computer, they typically look your computer and have a screen up. They are like they have a screen up on there, and it just shows that screen almost like a PowerPoint slide that says your document have been locked. We've got access to all your photos, your information, your passwords, email, your stuff you own on your computer. So now if you want your stuff back, you have to pay us £5,000, £10,000, £20,000, or even worse, you need to pay us like 200 Bitcoins, basically. So, and this happened to people, small businesses. It even happened to NHS, as you mentioned, a couple of years ago. So there's an entire NHS trust that got hit by ransomware attacks where criminal gangster grappled hold of the NHS system. So they had to shut down the entire networks and other small areas of the computing teams at certain hospital trusts. So this was starting to spread, and they want to have they want to have um, they won't have to close it down. So they shut down those networks and firewalls of those systems to make sure that the hackers couldn't get access to other bit of the networks and other data that was patient secure and specific. But there was that was a very real question. Then what do we pay? Do we pay for ransom? And do you think we should pay them if they do that? Well, it's highly recommended that you don't pay them because that's fueling them, and generate. There's no guarantee of getting your information, your data, your security back. No guarantee that they haven't copied it off and doing something else with it. So what do you do then? Have you lost your data? Well, if you've been backed up, then no, you are safe. But more than just going to, okay, well, we will just reformat our machines and then put data back on. Need to work out. Have they got access? Because there's nothing to stop them from doing it again and again, right? It's probably worth having quick Google after I finish this session about the ransomware attacks, where you can do you want to protect yourself from ransomware attacks, and what you should do if you are subject of the ransomware attack basically. So I'm just gonna. So this is the kind of screen that they basically show you. Yeah, that's the kind of screen that they will actually show you. Okay. All right. So we've got the Azure Key Wallet here. So this is store application secrets in centralized cloud location to securely control access permissions and access logging. So it's very good if you got very secretive information that you need to keep the security of and prevents for your customers. So they got key management certificate management, and you can store the secret packed by hardware security models. So it's, for me, to be honest, it's worth mentioning that during my studies and like all the experience that I've done, I've noticed like as well, like, have you heard about the public key and private key and all this stuff as well? Probably it's out of this subject, but worth mentioning that. Like some of the data it can only open if you have the private key. So even if the public key is there, it doesn't mean that you have access to it. So this is another way of securing your data, I believe, by having public key and private key. And if you have the private key on its own, also you can guarantee access to the data. So this is one of the cool things I've gone through in my life, I believe. So we've got a walkthrough again. Implement Azure Key Wallet. We've got Azure Information Protection, and I think you are hopefully starting to get an idea. and just the tone of different Azure services and solutions and systems basically in there. So it's very easy for you to go like you can use it for, you can use this for this or that, this for that, or things like this. But that kind of what this whistle stops order is doing, the fact that you get to go a bit on of a hands-on example through the Microsoft Learn platform is good, and then you ultimately and then the ultimately is going to be whatever your organization that you work in is using, that you need to be familiar with basically, but you can upscale quite quickly because you know they are what they, you know what they are, and what they do. So Azure Information Protection or APIs, and this classifies and protects documents, emails by applying labels to them. So automatically uses rules and conditions defining by your administrator. So you can either manually define them or by combining automatic and manual methods guided by recommendations. So that any documents that have certain bits of information needs to be treated this way, with this way. Emails that looks like this should be treated like this. So another common area of some security that's a big of issue at the moment, that is a big issue at the moment, is called cyber phishing or phishing basically. So generally you get an email and they send out lots and lots of people, they send out to lots of people basically at the same time. Says your details have been compromised, please click here to update your password or type your username. And so basically your old password and your new password, and it doesn't actually change your password, but it just takes your old password, and then the hackers have got your password and got your password, username, or your old password. They can go log in and get all your details, or get access to your bank details, all your credit cards, or your stuff on your Amazon account, for example, or your is linked to your card. So phishing attacks are quite widespread. Then you've got the more advanced one, which we call spear phishing attacks, where rather than just sending emails to like millions of people and seeing who respond, spear phishing attack is more targeted, like when you are doing a spear phishing in the sea to catch a fish, rights. So spear phishing attacks are targeted to certain individuals to try and get specific things in specific access. So you might target students at BCU to try get access to BCU's students' mainframe. Ideally, you've got like automatic and manual rules for emails for access requests, so and things and communications documents going through the servers that prevent spear phishing or phishing emails. So the last one in terms of services I'm going to talk about is the Azure threat protection. This is a cloud-based security solution for identifying, detecting, and investigating advanced threats. Things like compromised identity and malicious insider action. Now, compromised identities are not the easiest thing to detect, but there is an active area of research. There is an active area of research, basically, going on here. Particular, we try to identify what's normal behavior for the for an identity or for a practical user, particular user, and that's then abnormal for them sets of alarm or alerts, and then identify it, basically, notifies the threat protection system in cloud-based services. They are still quite new. They're not brilliant. So one of the systems is that was if you put your bank details in a place, it says instead to try, basically. That's one new way that the banks tried. Sometimes they cancel the transaction. So what they do is I don't know if anyone has ever had a bank card or transaction canceled, or there you go, there is the verified by Visa system, so that you may have done with the online shopping, whereas where you needed to type in your additional password or information for a few purchases, and then over the time getting more used to who you are and asking less and less for your confirmation to confirm your identity, or for you to type in your verified by password. Has anyone found that online? Any of you, did you find any of these kind of things online? I mean, personally, I buy these. It happened to me where I need to write like additional password to my cards and stuff. Anyone found these kind of things? Experienced these things before? None? Okay, so this is one of the systems that was put in place by banks and try to say, instead of for the traditional transaction, basically traditional transaction, them just canceling cards or locking down accounts, they would ask you to type in an extra password to verify by Visa password for that, and over time it would get to know who you are, what kind of things you bought, and it would basically ask you for password less and less and less. So now, what about the governance? In terms as Azure, so Azure policy is there basically to help you stay compliant and with your corporate standards and service level agreement. So, and this is where you get into like the large organization scales, where you've got things like service legal level agreement setup or policy setup and governance structure. You are not going to be doing these things on your own for a while. If you are in the cloud environment, and you will be more advanced in terms of credentials and your cloud expertise by that point. So you will have policy definitions to enforce rules and effects for your Azure resources. So have the value identification identifying basically resources that don't comply with your policies, where access is open to certain bits of information that shouldn't be, or where people aren't being treated, or their data isn't anonymized when it should be. So you've got a built-in policy and initiative definitions under categories like still rich network computer security centers and monitoring. And in terms of IT, and in terms of IT, but it's in a nice possible way. People who are in charge of IT policies tend to be more boring, basically, legal and legalistic. So IT professionals, but they have an awful lots of power in organizations, because if you are not compliant, then that's a big issue for you. So in order to implement Azure policies, you create policy definition. Say customers should be able to access their own information, but they should not be able to access someone else's information. So assign that definition, and then you review the evaluation results. So so is that the case for our customers able to get another customer's information? So policies definitions express is what you want to evaluate. You can implement policies definition by assigning it to a group of resources, and then you can review the results of it. The results. So it's most likely a self-check on the cloud system. So you can have your initiative definition and then assign them to lots of virtual machines, storages, databases. For instance, like work the policy initiative, basically to work the policy initiative works within Azure policies. So we've got the initiative definition group, multiple policy definition into a single unit to track compliance on higher level scope, and then initiative assignment are assigned to a specific scope of to reduce the need to make initiative definition for each scope, basically. There is a walkthrough again here. You can go through that in your own time. The walkthrough creating an Azure policy online. I know it's lots of information today, but I'm trying to finish this part of Azure before we break to the Christmas by next week, or this week, next week, whatever. So we've got the role-based access control, which is more of the traditional way of working rather than an individual thing. And when you get to a large organization, you would create groups or rules. So this is a fine gained access management. You would segregate the duties within your team and grant only the amount of access to users they need to do and perform their jobs, basically. So this enables or disallowing access to the Azure portal and control access to resources. So you got the users, you've got the apps, you've got the and the users groups, and then you would specify those through the Azure Active Directory and give them access to certain things in resource group. A bit like how you previously on the computer, how you previously on the computer maybe had an administrators manager, users, and things like that. And there's also a walkthrough for this online. So there is also walkthroughs for lots of things that I introduced in this session or the earlier one. Things like SQL databases and where you can create one of those online. So you basically not only do the walkthrough that we have here or the actual assignments. You can look into other things as well and try different stuff in there. Okay. So you can look certain resources whether they should be read, update, or delete, and whether they can be read only. So ideally, you want to make sure that if someone had had basically needs access to something, they can read or update, but they shouldn't be able to delete. Only people with a sufficient or significant access should be able to delete information, giving no matter how cheap the storage is. So I think I used to be working on Microsoft servers before. So on the server, you can basically create a group of users who can access the server. So in a small organization where they have their own servers and stuff, we install Microsoft 2012, I guess, R2. You create a group of users. You like this group for the HR, this group for the accounting, like whatever it is. And then each one of them has access to something that someone else doesn't. And so this is kind of things where they can only read, update, or delete, or stuff like this. So you assign basically what kind of things what the user should be having. Is it read only? Is it read and update? Things like that. There is a walkthrough as well for this. Azure blueprints. We have Azure blueprints. This creates reasonable environment definitions that can create the Azure resources and apply your policies instantly. So if you need to go through an IT security audit, or if you need to create or recreate or multiply, scale up your cloud systems, you want to create the blueprint first, and then you can template everything else, everything much easier. So associate blueprint with the specific Azure DevOps build artifacts and release pipelines for for tracking basically. Rigorous tracking. So that's when you get into the sharp end of the stack of the IT and the cloud system, templating, creation, and security operation. There are basically now in terms of monitoring and reporting in Azure, there are three main aspects to consider in the relation of creating and managing subscriptions. So you've got billing. This is the reports and the chargeback that can be generated per subscription. Access control. Oh, I'm here. So the access control. So subscription is deployment boundaries for Azure resources and goods at rule-based access control. And then you've got there is a limit to your subscription limit. So they are also bound of some hard limitations. If there is a need to go over those limits, then additional subscription can be needed. If you hit a hard limit, there's no flexibility. This is making sure that you don't spend money or do things that are outside the limit for your organization. So in terms of the next thing I'm going to talk about is monitoring and reporting in Azure. The first thing that we have is tax. So this is actually quite hard when you've got a decent meaty sized cloud system set up. So for your organization, understanding what you're actually going on at each point is really quite hard. So they've got created a few different ways of doing this. So in particular, you've got tags. This gives you what we call it metadata for your Azure resources. So your metadata might be, who the owner is, what the department is, what the environment is. So that's done something or create some data or save information there. So this allows you to logically organize resources into taxonomy. Um, so you can then search by the owner or department, by the environment, the cost center, and this is the name. This is a name value pair. So it's very useful for rolling up and pinning information, so you can know which department has spent the most. If you need to tell the marketing department to stop using this so much resources online, for instance, and stuff like this. And then we have walkthrough again for that one, implement resource tagging. And then we have we got Azure Monitor. So this allows you to collect and analyze and act on telemetry from cloud and on-premises environment to maximize your application's availability and performance. So keeping is a really close eye on what's going on. You've got activity logs matrix, and you can add an Azure Monitor agent to collect operational data for resources, and the thing is, you got really fine grade data there, and actually you can get too much data to deal with. But so although you've got this tool, there it might be that it's just not worth your time looking into it, and you just need to tell everyone to hold back and on spending so much on Azure. Once you start to do the walkthroughs and like all the other stuff online, you'll get like a better idea on what's happening in here. So once you get to all this stuff, basically it will become clearer for you, because I believe like practical is much more better than just talking and like giving theory stuff. I think Io, she will not agree with me because she's doing a research and stuff. So Azure Service Health. So then your Azure Service Health is so this is about evaluating the impact of service issues with the personalized guidance and support and notification. So you've got Azure Status Service Health and Azure Resources Health, um, and Azure Resources Health. I think it's pretty much explanatory in terms of health check, and that's that it's doing basically. Um, in terms of monitoring style, your Azure monitor will look at things in this way. So you will analyze, respond, visualize, uh, analyze, respond, visualize, and then integrate. So in terms of analyze, you want to look at the containers, virtual machines, and things, and look at the insights. So you can then respond proactively to critical conditions identified, and look at the monitor matrix, and visualize what's going on, and use tables and in Power BI, which is the Microsoft dashboard creating system, and then integrate Azure Monitor with other systems, create customized solutions to see the needs basically. So I guess this is the last part of today's session. We're almost there. So the last module we've got today is the privacy compliance and data protection standards. And this is really important to keep in mind, be mindful of as part of Europe, as part of the structure in the GDPR and compliance things we've got in this country. I know that the future of those things is somewhat unknown, given that we've left the European Union, and it might be that we keep the same data requirements, and maybe that we have other ones. If we have other ones, we will likely to need to be compliant still with the European guidelines and the UK guidelines, and in the future probably the US guidelines too. So that will become a bigger aspects, data compliance and system compliance, especially in the cloud. So Microsoft providers is the most comprehensive sets of compliance offering of any cloud service provider. Some compliance offering include the CGI, Criminal Justice Information Services, or the HIPAA, the CSA Star certification, and IEC ISO 27018, which is very important international standard there, GDPR, and the National Institution of Standards and Technologies. So Azure is doing stuff in the background for you anyway. In terms of the privacy statements, it provides openness and honesty about how Microsoft handles the user's data collected from its product and services. So it's really important to, if you are in charge of compliance, keep track of the privacy statements and see any updates in there. So it explains what data Microsoft's process, what data Microsoft basically processes, how it's process it, and what purpose the data is used for. And we've got here the Microsoft Trust Center, where you can basically learn about the security, privacy, compliance, and policies, and future the most Trust Center website providers. This in-depth expert information created a list of recommended resources and role specific information, so you can search it all through. And I think you have a walkthrough in here about exploring the data, the Trust Center. So Azure government services. So Azure has this different slight different separate branch as well, so to deal with the government services. So this meets security compliance needs of the U.S. federal agent in America. So status, local government, and their solution providers. Okay, they have the UK. They have a UK variant, and it's not as big yet, but the UK government is still quite slow on centralized or cloud-based services. Every department of the UK government has its own IT setup, and they are generally quite efficient, or they looking to set up there, basically. And finally, it's worth mentioning there are specific specific China or China first foreign public cloud server provider is the Azure China 21 variant in compliance with the government regulation. So it's physically separated instance of the cloud of the Azure cloud services, which is located in China. I'm in a position. I have to be very careful with this to give information and the way what I important that why it's that important. So to you, naturally, as you know, being treated as a lecturer here, but it is prepared by 21 Violet. So read into that, and that would be the end of this slides. Basically, I'm gonna just stop recording.